Hello, my name is Jean Brown, and you're listening to Seek Safely's Roundtable podcast. Today I'm here with Ginny Brown, Seek's founder, and my mom. And we're going to be discussing a little bit about some of the things we've encountered with Seek in terms of the challenge of establishing our need and explaining our need to people, why we exist as an organization, but then also some of the wins that we've experienced in terms of feedback we've gotten from people and the kinds of engagement and numbers that we're seeing through all of our platforms and content that we've put out. So I'll just start by asking Ginny a little bit about, how do you feel about the experience with Seek and the challenges that we've faced, kind of establishing ourselves, establishing the problem that we address and how we address it?
Well, I think we have entered this space that probably most not-for-profits face, especially not-for-profits that are set up to educate. A lot of times education is intended to prevent something by giving people information so they can make better decisions, they have more knowledge, and it's a difficult thing to prove what you've prevented. Mm-hmm. So demonstrating the effectiveness of what we do is a challenge. And I think also for all not-for-profits, especially those that are educationally based, donors want to see the impact of your work. They don't want to know that they're funding a staff. But if you don't have people doing the work, then that is the work. Mm-hmm. So I think it's been difficult for us to explain to people exactly what it is we do. We say our mission is to educate the public about self-help, to empower seekers to make safe and good decisions and efficacious decisions for their journey, and to promote ethical and safe practices in the industry. That's a huge mission, and it's broad. And it's difficult to explain to people exactly what we're doing in terms of the work to address the mission. So this has been a challenge. It's been a challenge to help people understand what we do. And it's also been a challenge to show them the impact of the work that we've done. And without donors, without funding, we can't do the work. Right. So that's been an ongoing challenge since we started this, and really started doing more aggressive work since, even though we incorporated in 2010, it was really 2013 that we really started to develop the website and do more work.
Right. Yeah. And I know in terms of, sort of establishing the need for the organization, one of the problems that we consistently run into is this idea that, people want to see numbers. They want to see hard evidence. And in terms of the harm that can be caused by the self-help industry, and even the benefit that comes out of the self-help industry, because it's an industry that isn't really well professionalized, and there's not cohesiveness to this industry, that information just doesn't exist. There's not some professional organization that's demonstrating the good work that they're doing, or that is, following some of the negative impacts that can happen. So we get we have a lot of anecdotal evidence of the need for our organization, but there's just nowhere to find, how many people are wasting money on self-help products, how many people are harmed at self-help events, how many people, have ruptures in their relationships or even lose their lives or end their lives after an event like this. So yeah, it's a challenge that we've faced a lot. But again, we are consistently getting a lot of feedback from seekers, and then also, interestingly, from family members of people who have been pulled into some questionable organizations. So maybe you can speak a bit to that.
Similar to the Me Too movement, people are reluctant to come forward when they've been harmed or scammed. They're embarrassed, they may be ashamed, they may have been convinced by the person running the event that it was their fault.
Mm-hmm.
And we've also learned that people get paid off.
Mm-hmm.
Once they threaten any kind of legal action, they're often paid off. So then they
Mm-hmm.
can't speak. So we have heard stories from people that we can't share because they'll get in trouble if they're made public.
In a way, it's similar. A lot of the really problematic gurus that we've seen, they're abusers, right? And
Mm-hmm.
one of the
Mm-hmm.
techniques that abusers use is gaslighting. And so that happens a lot,
Mm-hmm.
where they're
Mm-hmm.
convincing people that the negative experience that they had at an event was their own fault, rather than
Right.
the actions of the guru. And we've seen James Ray talk that way about Sedona as well, that the
Mm-hmm.
victims sort of brought it on themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
So that's a difficulty in proving the need, because when you
mm-hmm.
can't accumulate those stories, then it's hard, or the people who have been harmed aren't coming forth.
Right.
We've tried to do that on the website by showing repeated situations over time where people have been hurt. So
Mm-hmm.
again, a lot of this is more anecdotal rather than hard and fast metrics and
Mm-hmm.
numbers.
Yeah. But as you said, we're frequently getting letters from people who appreciate the work that we're doing, who've said, yes, like, I can see that I was involved in a group that was actually really problematic for a number of reasons, or I spent a lot of time, a lot of money working through some of these programs, or working with these teachers who weren't actually helping me at all. Or who
Mm-hmm.
might have been causing me harm. So we're getting, we get stories like that probably once a week or once every other week. We'll get a
Mm-hmm.
message
Mm-hmm.
from somebody telling us a
Mm-hmm.
bit about their experience. So we know that, if those are the people who have found us and reached out to us, there are probably a lot of people who haven't found us or aren't willing to reach out. So we know for sure that it's
Mm-hmm.
an issue, and that people appreciate the work that we do.
Just in the last few weeks, I've gotten emails from the UK, someone from England, someone from Ireland, and then another person from Germany, saying that they need something like Seek Safely in their area. And could they start? Did we know of anything in their area to connect them to? Could they start something like this in their countries? So you hear that message and you go, oh, obviously these persons who have contacted us um, take issue with the industry and know that there's difficulties, know that there are problems, and know that people need more education to make better choices and decisions and to keep themselves safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, as we're saying, like, one of the things that we consistently find difficult is being an educational organization. It's a lot of putting information out there, and we get some feedback, but we know that, ultimately what we really want is for people to take in the message, which is pretty simple, and just keep it in mind whenever they're doing their own self-help work and their own seeking.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes it's hard to know for us, what kind of impact we are having. But every so often, we'll kind of go through and look at the numbers, and we can see that, through our website, through our social media, we've reached probably at least 500,000 people in the time that we've been putting out our message, which is kind of amazing to think about. And we're consistently growing all the time. Every day we're adding new people, new followers on Facebook and across all our platforms. So we're almost at 10,000 followers on Facebook now, which is amazing. And that's where we tend to get a little bit more conversation from seekers as well. We have 172 total signers to our Seek Safely promise. So the promise is a commitment that self-help professionals can make to operating in a safe and ethical way in the absence of any sort of industry standards of best practices and safety practices. We put out the promise as a way for self-help professionals to recognize their responsibility and to commit to taking that responsibility seriously. So we have 172 of those signers and 98 of them just since July 2020.
And there were people who signed the promise who have since stopped practicing. So when we started accumulating, putting the Seek Safely promise out to practitioners in 2013, we had quite a few people who signed and have since either stopped their particular practice. So
right.
Then they came off. So when we look at numbers from the beginning, it's actually considerably higher than
more than that. Yeah, exactly. And then these roundtable discussions, which we started doing last January, I always look in the first couple of days after we put them out there, and we'll have, about 20 or 30 people that watch them, and I'll think, okay, But then when I go back and look over time, it's more like, a few hundred people are watching these videos either on Facebook or through YouTube. So when I go through and look at all of the videos we've done since January, we've had at least about 7,000 people have watched these discussions. And, sometimes we're talking about sort of upcoming events for Seek, or we're just picking a topic, having some guests on to cover a topic that's relevant to the self-help industry. We're so grateful for everybody who's watching these things, and we hope that these discussions are valuable and interesting for people. And yeah, we have our book, which we put out in June 2020, This Sweet Life, and that was a really interesting time to release a book because we weren't able to do a lot of the normal book release things that we would have done under normal circumstances, non-pandemic circumstances. But we've still sold over 1,000 copies of that book
and
to all kinds of people.
Yeah, and the purpose of the book was not just to tell our story and to have people know who Kirby was, but to bring people to this organization. We had decided to write the book really as to some extent, thinking of it almost like a marketing tool to get people to understand what happened and then come to the organization to continue to get more information or to share that with others that they know who might be interested in attending events or purchasing products.
Right. Yeah. And, as a small organization, we're very much supported by our friends and family and people who were connected to Kirby or connected to what happened to Kirby. So for us, telling our story through our memoir is just another point of connection for people, another way for people to access our story so that they can then feel some connection to our mission as an organization.
When we're asked, at least when I have been asked, well, what exactly do you do? I say, I do the 3 R's, reading, research, reaching out. It's a lot of time trying to get a sense of what's going on in the industry, trying to stay current, being able to respond to things that may be happening, and at the same time, constantly reaching out and making ourselves available for any kind of media opportunities that will also push out the organization and its mission in any way possible. So we've done podcasts, we've been on TV shows, we've been on different kinds of series over time. Just in the last 2 years, the History Channel, the Oxygen Network, we've been in contact with someone from Left Right TV production, media. We've been on the Daily Beast. We had a big interview with the Toronto Star last year, and in April we did a big interview for an organization in Australia, a magazine through AR Media in
Yeah,
Australia.
Australian Women's Weekly in
Oh,
Australia. Yeah.
and we haven't seen the article yet, but it has a very wide distribution. So this is another example of how we're also international. We're a very small organization, but we have an international reach because this industry is international.
Mm-hmm.
And our story may be a dramatic example of abuse, but it's not an anomaly.
Mm-hmm.
And these concerns really exist across the globe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And this is one of the things that will happen. We have our story out there. We don't always know exactly who's looking or who's reading and seeing us. But then every so often, somebody will reach out to us and say, I heard the Guru podcast, or I heard the podcast and then I read your book, or I saw you on Investigative Discovery. And then they reach out to us with, I do, a podcast, or I'm writing a book, I'm doing some research for this, and they ask us to kind of contribute and help them, which is also amazing. And like you say, it speaks to the fact that people everywhere are interacting with this industry. Another thing that just happened recently, a few weeks ago, I started getting a flurry of messages from various people. Have you watched 9 Perfect Strangers yet? So I started watching the show. It's on, here in Canada, it's on Amazon Prime. I think it's on Hulu in the US. I'm not sure, but it's based on a book by Leanne Moriarty, and it's about a self-help retreat, and it makes reference to the Sedona Sweat Lodge deaths, and it goes through questionable practices that seem really out there, but actually aren't that uncommon in this industry and when people go to these sorts of events. And so we're actually going to be talking about that on our roundtable discussion next week. We'll go into that a little bit more. But it's just another example of the way that, these sorts of stories resonate with a lot of people from all over the place. Leanne Moriarty, she's Australian. And, I know for some of the people who were at Sedona, especially, seeing the story mentioned is hard for them. I feel though I'm happy to see the story resonating and being brought up in different ways. So if it's coming out through a podcast and people like podcasts and they can listen to that and hear it, or if it's coming out in a work of fiction, it's still another way for people to access this idea of the fact that there's a lot of abuse and harm that can come out of this industry. It doesn't have to be that way. It shouldn't be that way. It should be positive. People who are seeking should be having these positive growth experiences. But if you're not careful, that might not be what you encounter. So I'm sort of happy for that message to get out in any form possible.
I think one of our most quantifiable efforts might be the fact that we have legislation pending in New York. We've been working on this for 6 years, and we have a bill in the Senate, 1643, and in the Assembly, it's A5658. This bill is now in the Consumer Protection Committee in the Senate for some revision and some discussion, but both Senator Skoufis and Assemblywoman Sandy Galiff are making this a priority for the 2022 session. So this is really an attempt to look at people who provide this kind of personal and professional advice given in some sort of an event, using different tactics to get people motivated, and they do not have any professional license that's recognized by the state, so that if something goes wrong, they're not censured in any way. um, they have no body to answer to. So it leaves the consumer without a place to get appropriate recourse. So we're hoping that this will go. And what we're saying is if you're going to ask people to take a risk, which is okay because we take risks all the time, if you're going to ask people to take a risk, you have to disclose it very carefully. And then you have to have a risk management in place, a plan in place that includes professionals to deal with emotional harm or physical harm.
Right.
This happens all the time in our world, where we do a marathon and you see water tents and the Red Cross available or people there, so that if something goes wrong or someone gets hurt, maybe they have a condition that they were unaware of, there's someone there to help them and to ensure that they can be safe.
Right.
So we're
Yeah.
hoping that 22 will be a banner year in terms of having had a real impact, at least in New York, and that maybe this legislation then would be picked up by other states.
Exactly. So yeah, if you're interested in learning more about that effort, we actually had Assemblywoman Sandy Galiff on our Roundtable podcast. I think it was back in May or April. So you can watch that if you want to get a little bit more of her perspective. And these are just, kind of highlighting all of the different ways that people can support the work that we do at Seek. Obviously, financial help is always appreciated. We need money to do anything. But it's also, if you're a seeker and you have experiences that are useful to us, we'd love to hear your story. You can always reach out to us on Facebook or emailing us info@seeksafely.org. If you are a New York State resident and you have legislators you can reach out to ask them for their support of our bill, that's amazing. Even if you're not in New York State, as Sandy mentioned when she was on our show before, even if you're not a New York State resident, your voice is still impactful with these legislators. And then, we have our fundraising, our annual fundraising event coming up in November. So we'll be doing an in-person event, hopefully, but we also are going to do an online auction that will run in tandem with the event. So that's another way you can support us, participating in the auction or donating something for the auction. So,
and some of the event we will stream so
yeah.
that you can get a flavor of what we're doing physically. So we're hoping to be able to do both things. Last year, we streamed the event because we couldn't meet in person. And quite a few people said they really appreciated kind of the update on what's going on and what we're doing and where things are at. So we will be doing that again at the event, and we will be streaming that portion of the event and maybe giving you a little taste of the great music that we're hoping to have for the evening.
Yeah.
That's going to be November 6th at the Powelton in Newburgh from 5 to 8. So it's not long. Great food. Going to be amazing music. And then a lot of physical auction items will be displayed at that event.
Yeah. And then, of course, the easiest way that you can support us is just by watching these videos, liking them, sharing them, subscribing to our channels, and following us on social media. That's always helpful as well. And it doesn't cost you anything and it takes very little time. So yeah, any way that you can support us, we always appreciate.
Yeah, we want to continue to do this work, but we're really at a critical point in needing more funding in order to fuel the work that we're trying to do. We'd really like to grow this organization, but we really need your help and your support to make it happen.
Yeah. So if you want to join the conversation, we always welcome your comments and thoughts on our videos and posts. for info about this fundraising event we have coming up on November 6th, just follow along. You can always subscribe to our newsletter on our website. And we'll be posting lots of info about the event coming up. So if you can attend, that's amazing. Or if you just want to participate virtually, that's great too. So,
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So thank you for watching.
And thanks, Jean.
Yep. Thank you.